Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Cantav on Mix 94.7 FM. And I hope that all of you had a blessed week. This afternoon, I'm glad to have with me the second minister who is joining us on the show, and that is the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Minister of Justice, Minister Anna Richardson. Good afternoon to you, and thank you for being on the program.
Afternoon to you, Mr. Cantav. Thank you for having me on your show.
Great. So I'm glad to have you on the program because, when I send the invite, justice has been at the forefront. There are different things that have their day in the news cycle.
That's
of course,
true.
Immigration being one of them. But, immigration is one thing in particular that, has been a hot button issue. It is sensitive to most, but I think it is clear that something we have to address as a nation, particularly because we are only so big. So my first question for you is, given that even a member of parliament recently put out a press statement or asking some questions about the controls that are taking place and the like. You've actually taken a hard stance on immigration since last year, January, and again in April, when you issued a ministerial decree with amended guidelines that tighten the process for obtaining a residence permit. So with that, could you explain your approach and how do you plan to address the concerns of persons living here undocumented for years, in particular those who positively contribute to our society?
Good. Thank you very much for the question. So I'll start with those who positively contribute to our society. We welcome those persons. We have been welcoming them in to our immigration offices and processing their paperwork as much as possible. One of the things that we have to understand about the immigration laws is that it speaks very direct that one must be able to self-sustain, which means you have to have proper employment. To have proper employment means you have to go through the Ministry of VSA or Labor to acquire a work permit. But the individual is not the one who is applying for such a permit. It is that of the employer. Part of the makeup of the multidisciplinary team right now is, in actuality, compliance, full spectrum. Compliance in the sense that if the employer is not applying for the employee and has not done so over the years, then that in itself creates a problem already. Many focus on the Ministry of Justice immediately in terms of residence, but does not pay attention to the fact that, like I said earlier, the law requires you to have income that can sustain your lifestyle or your ability to have at least the basic needs. So we have a lot of persons that are coming into the immigration department to file for residency. They are bringing the documents that they need, such as, let's say, a job letter, pay slips, but then indicate that their employer blatantly refuses to apply for their work permit. That's a problem. We have persons, you made mention about the MBA that I had published, or the guidelines I published in April. Those guidelines were based on the guidance or advisory of the legal team who deals with our, let's say, Bazwar and Barup, so our appeals committee that deals with court cases, etc., that are filed, or persons who petition against a negative decision that they might have received. In observing the patterns and the practices of persons applying for residency permits, it became known that there were certain illegal practices that were being used to kind of beat the system. Fraudulent documents being presented, giving a picture of one thing but something else. There's a lot of discussions. Let's say, for example, you'll recall when COVID hit and the borders was closed and the French was basically managing the borders, who's going in and out. That was an opportunity when the French side as well realized that a lot of people who were collecting the CAF support were residing on the Dutch side when their law says you must reside on the French side. So that in itself sparked a lot of attention as to how persons were basically abusing both governments or systems. And we can't facilitate that. We can't support such practice. Now, that as well, you have persons who would say, for example, bring a school letter that their child is attending this school. But when you do the research, this school only goes up to a certain age. Meanwhile, this child is way past that age. And we couldn't see why it was necessary to go that route, because St. Martin has a no child left behind policy, which means that even if you are undocumented, you are still supposed to attend school. So you did not need to lie or be dishonest about what really is happening with your child. And that in itself plays heavily against the child, because the child's literacy level would be low if they're really not attending school. And that causes a problem when they become adults. Then they have difficulty getting jobs. They have difficulty really being able to survive in society. So we as a community and as a country need to make a decision about where we want to invest our focus and invest good time and money into making sure that the products of our people are high level, are levels, or to levels, I should say, that allows them to be able to get a decent job and be able to self-sustain. So what we don't seem to realize as a community, because of course not everyone is going to agree with any action. There are going to be those who are for, there are going to be those who are against. And everybody has valid reasons why they take the position that they do. But if you're not looking at matters from a holistic standpoint, then when you encounter something that you dislike, you don't even realize that exactly what you championed for or against contributed to that very... Right, there's a spin-off to it, or an effect that you don't realize. So one may not be in favor of immigration controls, but immigration controls has so many prongs attached to it about how it can positively or negatively affect one's life as well as the community that they live in. So I gave you some examples about needing to crack down on persons bringing in letters for their children going to a particular school when that really wasn't the case. We had to also tighten up on the idea of concubine. So in the Netherlands, concubine marriages are recognized, they are registered, they are monitored. In St. Martin, they're not. So legally, one would go to the notary, or I should say, and acquire this document. But legally, it has no real legal basis here in St. Martin. And what the immigration department was experiencing was the following. A man and a woman would come and say that they are a couple, they've been together for X many years. And then when they do the separate interviews, the man couldn't remember the woman's name. The woman couldn't remember this about the man. And it just became clear on too many experiences that persons were doing this for the sole purpose of acquiring a residency permit, which means you are basically being you're not being honest about your real situation.
I have a little interjection.
Sure.
There are two things in particular. In the beginning, you stated that one of the things you faced was the ministry or the department, fraudulent documents.
Yes, we faced those as well.
One point there is basically, has there been because I've never seen anything published in terms of a crackdown on persons who are falsifying their documents. Not saying that it hasn't happened.
Yes.
So
there was a case where a wife, and this is one I can share with you of many, a wife, it was found that she drafted a job letter for her husband indicating that he works at a certain establishment, and when the research was done, the mobile team went to check, etc. That was not the case.
You've had cases of falsified actual legal papers as well?
Yes, falsified. So if you write a job letter for your husband to state that he works somewhere that he doesn't work, that's a false document that you are providing to the immigration department and want that to be accepted as
I get what you're
factual.
saying. What I mean is, once you're granted your resident, so falsified permits. Have you had cases of that?
No. So you mean persons outside of immigration making papers?
No. Okay.
Yeah.
What I mean is, let's say immigration officer picks up someone and the person pulls out a permit. False permit.
I cannot say that we have encountered those yet.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, whether or not there was, because you have cases where people create falsified passports. That's what I mean.
I hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Good point. But no, that has not been brought to me. What we've seen is persons submitting false documents. Gotcha. We've had persons submit tax returns, and you can see where they've manipulated the numbers, made the copies, submitted it. When verified with the tax department, that's not the case. Like I said, we had a wife that did this letter for her husband and etc. That is a case that went to court, and the judge ruled in favor of government that it was illegal. The activities were illegal, and so the penalty for that was that even the wife's permit was then revoked, because what you do then is you set the precedence that you probably acquired your paperwork by submitting fraudulent documents. It was probably missed back then, but because you chose to go that route this time, it led to that end result. And there's a whole list of others.
I got you. So just I guess one point on that, in the case of, let's say, concubine relationships.
Yes.
If someone has indeed, let's say, lived together for a long time, maybe got married and officially, maybe just with a church, let's say, on St. Martin, or just there is actual proof that they've been together for a long time.
Yes.
Then,
yes, you have children and all of that. The exceptions are made there. But it has to be viable, that we can see that it is an actual real relationship. Yes. I'm not calling any names or anything like that, but we've had scenarios where persons are married to someone, like legally married to someone, but then engaged in a concubine agreement with someone else, and then you're finding out that that's not really the way. It's really a saga. It's not good. And so we can't facilitate those things.
Naturally.
So we had to remove that. But like I indicated several times before, we look at each application on a case-by-case basis. I receive tons of letters on a daily basis from persons that are explaining their circumstance, their situation, can provide proof of, let's say, I attempted in the past, but I got gypped for my money, or I had papers before, but then this circumstance happened. You can find opportunities to be able to give that leniency once persons are honest and truthful about what had transpired. And like I said, there are viable grounds for you to be able to grant that exception.
Okay.
So that's happening.
Okay. So I'd like to go back a bit to the beginning upon becoming minister. My question for you there is, so I know you studied criminology and criminal justice in the U.S.
Yes.
And professionally, you spent many years in your career in the financial sector.
I did.
So what was it like for you in the first weeks of becoming minister and basically learning on the job, but also what were your main priorities, and would you say you're on target of accomplishing some of your aims?
Thank you for that question. It was quite a transition, but I was a member of parliament for a few months before I transitioned. But before that, I worked as a support staff in parliament to the members of parliament. So I was familiar with the ins and outs there. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector as well. And as you indicated, banking and financial. So transitioning to become a minister, for me, I look at this work as, the operations, it's a business. And in any business operation, you have to be optimal. And within the Ministry of Justice itself, there are a lot of loose ends. For years and years, there were a lot of things not handled. Personnel matters, for instance, is one of those big things that many of the staff were very frustrated with. Just this past Wednesday, after 9 years of prison officers being in service, I was able to swear them in. That was very frustrating for those officers, and quite often I would hear about they're just demotivated by the fact that it has taken them 9 years before they were officially recognized into the Ministry of Justice in their capacity. We talked about, and we all know about the whole situation with the function book that had more than 11 years of not being completed as it should, and we were successful to do that last December. And finally, within this early of 2022, it went to the ombudsman as it needed to, and within, I don't know, a month, we were able to receive a response from the ombudsman that she's not going to challenge the LBHUM, which is good. So pretty much the function book is complete, but there are still other ends to it. So for example,
okay, go ahead.
The Rexpositie or the police law, you have immigration that would like their own law, you have customs would like their own, and rightfully so, all the agencies are asking for their separate Rexposities or laws, because the services that they provide are not identical, but still in some ways similar.
Yeah.
And so you can't use a cookie cutter, so to speak, approach on it. You have to recognize what each service requires, what they carry out, what they do, how their hours work, etc., and be able to tailor make, so to speak, laws that governs their service. Right? So we're busy with that right now.
With drafting those laws.
With drafting. They're pretty much drafted, but the unions would sit with my legal team and fine-tune it to ensure that it has all the aspects that are necessary. For example, the Rexpositie KPSM exists, but the version that exists right now has some elements that are missing, like recognizing pension plans, properly regulating or updating overtime compensation packages, and so forth. So those are being discussed as in the current, and I'm really looking forward to us getting those as well on the legislative track. We also have to do some updating to the LEOL. And in doing the updating to that,
for
it
those
means
who may not know,
the LEOL is basically the structure that governs the structure of the Ministry of Justice. So all the departments that fall under the Ministry of Justice is recognized in the LEOL. Forgive me that I can't give you the English translation to that. In me learning my Dutch, I am so caught up in those terminologies. Most
entrenched in the Dutch language.
Yeah. So with adding, so for example, we have the police, Landsecherge or national detectives. We have Coast Guard. You have customs, as I said, immigration. They are all, as a few, already recognized in the LEOL, but then we have to add the Court of Guardianship, SEIB, or our probation foundation, the Miss Lally Center, and as well, we are now going to change the name of the Justice Academy to St. Martin Law Enforcement Institute of St. Martin. That as well those have to be incorporated now into the LEOL, into the framework of how the Ministry of Justice is structured. So we still have some elements that we have to do, salary table updates and these things, and we're busy with those.
Basically, there's quite a long haul.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a long haul, because something that was overdue for 11 years, we did it in about a year and change. But these elements are not as intense as the function book that came with job descriptions and so forth. So
but then the Puerto minister has different departments. So civil servants express what would the bottlenecks. If certain things can be accomplished within a few months, 11 years is definitely a stretch.
Well, it is, because there's a lot of opinions that comes into these things. I want this. No, we have to do it this way. No, this is the way we want it. And you have to be careful with how large you expand certain things. Sometimes you have opinions that want you to build the organization around them. But you actually have to build the organization around the needs of your community, because that's who you're serving. How large must your institution be? And next to that, financially, right? You can want it as large as you want, but you have to be able to afford that. And if we're not generating the income we need to be able to supplement it, we will run ourselves into a problem. So there is a lot of aspects to it that has to be discussed and weighed. And then you're not necessarily creating a new wheel. So this is operations that's happening in Curacao, in Aruba, in the Netherlands, and the rest of the world. And you have to be able to pay attention to those that are working as well.
So does the Ministry of Justice still have SLAs with Curacao or any?
Not in particular, but in some sense. So let's take the prison, for example. Within the prison directors within the kingdom, they have working agreements. You also have a platform of the chief of police. Quite often, our chief of police, who is also the president of this platform, where the chiefs of police within the kingdom comes together and they discuss similar matters that each island or territory is dealing with, how they, best practices, so to speak, programs that they want to roll out, how they support each other. Those types of working relationships do exist.
But not with financial costs added to them, or just in a matter of...
Well, yeah, anything that you want to do has financial costs attached to it, but then they work that out together, or it's shared, or we would on the YVO level. So the YVO is a tripartite working relationship between the four ministers, actually.
Okay.
So the Minister of Defense in the Netherlands, Minister of Justice in Martin, Aruba, Curacao, we come together twice a year, and we discuss matters that affects all within the kingdom, and the chief of police agendas are oftentimes a part of that as well.
Okay, gotcha. And just for further clarity on the function book, with it being, let's say, basically passed with the ombudsman, what is the final steps?
Well, that's it for the function book itself. The function book is done.
Okay.
So it's the other aspects that need to complete. So things such as I mentioned, the Rexposities, the laws that govern the various agencies, those we are busy with now.
Okay.
There are certain adjustments to salary tables that we're busy with as well. That's where we are with that. Cool. But the book itself, approved.
Finished.
Yes.
Okay.
And so to answer your question, that was my number one priority coming into the ministry. And I'm happy that one was accomplished, and we would just stay focused and continue to get the rest done.
In basically completing the finalization of the structures.
Yes. Yeah. And personnel matters. There's a lot of staff that has their own specific issues with the ministry over the years. I am busy right now with an interim HR director that I have for the ministry. We are busy right now with...
That's separate from the
central P&O?
Okay.
Yes, it is. And that was one of the things that we must understand about the Ministry of Justice, is that the Ministry of Justice is governed by higher kingdom laws. It's not an administrative ministry. So much of the debate that we had in the offset was that a lot of the FTAs were initially being pulled out from the ministry to be placed into the centralization of government, and that was in conflict with the higher kingdom laws.
Understood.
So those are things that had to be fixed. So what I am trying to do is really address personnel matters. So I'm putting a team together who will do just that. One of the things that I'm looking at doing is being able to communicate to the staff that they can submit all of their, let's say, complaints or their inquiries or matters that had not been handled for them over the years. We will have a central point that they will be able to submit those, and I'll have a team that will go through all of that. Because a lot of what the staff is complaining about, I don't like the word complain, because they're valid, that they are expressing their grievances on are valid, and they should be addressed. The problem has been, though, that not sufficient attention had been placed on those, or it would have arrived at a certain point and stop, didn't go where further on as it should. Those matters oftentimes ends up in court cases unnecessarily, which brings a cost for government. I am trying to reduce the court cases and reduce those expenses, unnecessary expenses for government, because those monies can be allocated into more productive services for St. Martin.
So how do you plan to address the case where, I do know that you have some law enforcement persons who have taken the the case to court, won the case, but have not received any compensation as yet.
Well, all of that is being worked out. So I have a legal team right now that is working it out. And when we talk about hasn't been compensated yet, we have to also bear in mind that we work with a budget. So if the budget year did not recognize those fundings, then we have to incorporate that in the next budget year. But again, I'm saying that a lot of cases that were won just didn't receive the attention that it needed to, either beforehand, during, or after. But now I'm putting a team together to focus on
case
that.
Of prevention.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Indeed,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So one of the things that I saw in terms of announcement that was made last year was the Victim Support St. Martin Foundation. So can you provide us with an update on the foundation, and has the management and staff positions been filled? Also, considering that we still have a deficit in the country's budget, does it have the adequate financial backing to actually function as it should?
Yes, it does. It does because we established the foundation last year officially, so it has a board. The positions for this particular foundation was developed by Balance, the company, the same company that did the positions and descriptions, job descriptions for the function book, assisted us with putting this together for the victim support. The publications for these positions are being finalized by my HR team. I would have liked to have them out before, long before, but our goal is to be able to have them finalized, published, and then start having interviews rolling by the end of March. It's really essential for us to get this going. We started out the year already with trauma, and a lot of incidents has happened already in 2022, as young as it is. So we really know that it is necessary for the victim support services to begin opening its doors and dealing with these traumatic experiences, the families, the victims themselves, and so forth.
Okay. So as far as another announcement, the complaints committee is something that was also introduced last year. Can you provide us an update on that, and when will that be established? But also in particular, will it be working alongside KPSM only or other judicial institutions?
So there are two platforms of the committee that's coming. KPSM has one that is regulated by law, so for police only. And then we have one that we are doing separately for the general, so all other agencies that we would have. Of course, these are legal instruments that have to be developed to ensure that we are following the law as it is prescribed, and that the committees that will be taking up these responsibilities understand entirely what their role and responsibilities are. You don't just select anyone to place on these committees. These have to be persons who are really knowledgeable and cognizant of the elements that play a role in the service line that one could be accused of. Behavioral specialists, former police officers, if you may, legal minds, etc. You have to get. So we have finally acquired persons who agreed to be a part of these committees. The LBAs, or the national decrees rather, are being drafted. Those will then go to the governor. If the governor is satisfied that the instrument has been prepared correctly in all aspects and it makes sense, the compensation is suitable, etc. Understanding how often these individuals will meet, because it's a committee, it's a board, they don't meet every single day, but they have files that they have to decide how often, go through those files, do some investigation, and then provide an advice to the minister as to what the next action should be. So all of those are being ironed out. This in particular has taken way longer than I would have liked it to be, but I'm hoping that before quarter one ends of 2022, we will have them finalized.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sure.
So another article that came about last year was one from the Integrity Chamber based on the report that they published. Well, one of the reports that they published, and I'm curious about what steps have you taken since that report on the risk within the judicial departments to establish stability and structural changes, and basically to prevent any further integrity breaches.
Yes. Actually, I invited the Integrity Chamber to have the Ministry of Justice first on their list in terms of observation and be able to provide that report. So once again, I thank them for indeed honoring that request. What we've done, though, is I've turned that report over to my Judicial Affairs Department within Justice, and we are coupling that with recommendations we've received from the Law Enforcement Council and any other councils that would have provided the Ministry of Justice with recommendations of how we can improve this ministry. So Judicial Affairs is busy with that. They have done a presentation with all agency heads, because the agencies are where these structural enforcements needs to take place, adjustments, and so it's necessary for each agency to be well on top of that. And it is a part of our year plan this year, 2022, that all agencies will take strides in being able to implement the recommendations and make those necessary adjustments as so recommended by, let's say, the Integrity Chamber, Law Enforcement Council. And there's another one that I know we received some recommendations from that we are also using as our guide to be able to improve this ministry.
Okay, gotcha. So I would like to go back to immigration for a bit. It being, I think, probably one of the most complex issues. For one, basic where persons are held. Are they held in town or in Point Blanche? And
no, we have the facility in Simpson Bay.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's really
and your capacity is so basically it's not overrun, like in terms of cells?
No, not at all. And you know what we do is I must commend the immigration operations for how quickly they are processing persons, especially those who cannot show any viable reason for being here. You have some persons, as I've mentioned on previous platforms, who are released on that 6-week melplicht, or that opportunity for them to be able to regulate their paperwork, etc., within the 6 weeks. So they are detained, yes, but once the interview is done and they can provide certain paperwork to support, let's say I have my my paperwork in here, a family member brought the confirmation of that person is released, but then given a time period to be able to regulate themselves. The scenarios are differ. They fluctuate. And we work along with those. It is those persons who cannot show, like I said, any viable reason for being here and no attempts to be able to be here legally that are quickly processed and sent back to their country.
Okay.
So we do not have any capacity issues at the Flint.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. So another report that did came about was in terms of documenting people whose residence permits were lapsed due to the government shutdown, and some of them have been facing issues, even being turned down. So can you shed some light on why this is happening and how has this situation been remedied or trying to remedy the situation?
Yeah. Unfortunately, when it comes to the administrative offices, there have been some slip-ups. And I have the compliance team who has caught some not. And even I, hundreds of files that I have to sign. I now have to also take my time and go through, especially the denials. I'm not really going through the approvals that much because at the end of the day, no one is really going to fuss with you about the approval. It is those denials that I take a little bit more time myself and go through it. And I have also found situations where I've sat with the team and I say, explain to me why this one is being denied. We've gone through it, and there has been instances when I'll say no, but what about this? And they'll say, you know what, Minister, you're right. And they'll go back and they'll overturn the decision because the person should have gotten it, and we made certain that it was. So I have adjusted myself as well and we have had to do that with the moving and the shaking and the changes and implementations to be able to ensure that we are not wrongfully denying someone who is entitled to it. It is a case, though, when you see that, it's a clear-cut no, legally, then I sign it's no.
Okay, and
but we are looking into those instances with, and I mentioned as well, sorry to cut you off, that we have the appeals committee And the appeals committee is where persons, if they receive a denial, they have the ability to go to the appeals and state their case. If the appeals committee recognizes that there is a valid reasoning that they should not have been denied, then the decision is overturned.
Okay. And I guess that information is provided to them in terms of like who they call, the numbers and all that.
You know, I mean,
in terms of the appeal committee.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get that worked differently, Mr. Kantav, because the persons who are applying for permits are not Dutch-speaking reading persons. These and so I've said to my team, I really believe we need to translate these documents into English, so persons are aware that it states that if you disagree with the decision, you can appeal. Because and no pun intended to lawyers, you know, they'll make their money, but they can avoid having to spend so much money if they just use the appeals committee to be able to state their case, and they get that opportunity. They sit there and they can explain their situation. If it was a case that initially they didn't submit something to be able to suffice the application, and that caused the denial, then that's an opportunity to fix it. I have had files in front of me where the reasoning for denying it is because it's a first-time applicant and they were not supposed to be on the island while their paperwork is being processed. However, when going through the file, I'm able to see that this is someone that I granted in writing the opportunity to remain on the island for a specific period of time while their paperwork is being finalized. So that one I'll send it back and say, no, you can see that I gave them the authorization. Why was this person denied? This one needs to be fixed. So we have, like I said, circumstances are different. That's why it is so important to handle it, all cases on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So, one of the common debates, some that I've had on this program, but even in general in our society, is the barrier that comes with Dutch language. Mm-hmm. Has your ministry made any budgets to have, sort of translations be made? But I'm curious about, in particular, the Judicial Institute, mm-hmm. Because persons have to, in order to become an officer, etc. Mm-hmm. You have to take the courses in mm-hmm. Dutch and so forth. Mm-hmm. But is there any amendment that can be made to whether make it bilingual or
that is being explored.
That it's done in the language of the population?
Totally agree. I had a conversation on social media with a young lady that expressed her passion to do this, but that, in all honesty, her Dutch is not that strong, and she just thinks it's so unfair that, we have persons in our community who really would be of good service to the country to work in these capacities, but the language being indeed the barrier. We are discussing this, we're exploring it. I'm not sure at this moment what the possibilities are legally, because we also need to recognize that when certain documents has to, let's say, go to the courts are operating with Dutch. Doesn't mean that it's right. But like I said, we are exploring the possibilities with that, and I think that would have to go through the legislative track, a parliament discussion to decide the way that we want to go and how we can go about it.
Okay. And with the Judicial Institute, former Justice Academy, how is progress being made there as far as the curriculum, having the staff for training of personnel and mm-hmm. so forth? And I guess what is being done to address any capacity issues that you have there, that we have all people who will be able to, right. give these trainings and so forth? Right.
Definitely, we have a lot of retirees of this ministry who are certified instructors. As a matter of fact, I met with the Retiree Foundation of Justice. Forgive me if I'm saying their name incorrect. But it is a very healthy pool of men and women who have served for many years in the ministry, who were instructors at the Justice Academy, and are just also looking forward to the reestablishment of the facility so that we can. In stating that, in the Coal Bay area, where once ago there was the Sorama building, the Justice Academy or the Law Enforcement Council, that's where we want to be able to build it there. Having a shooting range, gymnasium, forensic lab, classrooms, administrative offices. That's the plan for there. Curriculums were already developed for the Ministry of Justice, all the different sectors within. It just needs to be accredited. those curriculums need to be recognized in accreditation, as well as the facility that we will build. The institute in itself would need to have accreditation applied to it. You may know, since you seem to follow me well, we have the course coordinator that was brought in, Miss Martina. She hails from Curacao, and she worked at the Justice Institute there in Curacao. So she has a vast knowledge in the curriculums and the various uplightings that the students or the officers need to have to be certified. I have a presentation coming up from her on March 1st, where she will be showing me what her assessments have uncovered thus far and the way forward for the Ministry of Justice and the personnel with regards to their certification courses.
Okay. Can you detail a bit more in what way is the country package addressing capacity issues of the Ministry of Justice, but overall beefing up of the ministry? So what are the key things that it touches on?
Country packages touches on border management and immigration. I think that's 811. We are dealing and focusing with the prison in the country package. There are other aspects that I can't bring to my mind right now, but in particular, when we talk about beefing up staff, no. One of those things that was on the country package was the finalization of the function book, and we can put a check mark next to that one. So with regards to personnel, the focus was really the function book.
Okay.
And that's complete.
Okay. And with the prison, I guess I missed if an announcement was made, but when is the construction expected to take place? I think that the bid was already finalized. Am I mistaken?
No. No bidding has been done yet on the prison. What we have been in consultation with for quite some time now is the UNOPS organization. And where we are right now is for them to arrive on St. Martin to do an assessment of the facility, do an assessment of land space, have discussions about the way that we can map this going forward. Ultimately, what we need from the UNOPS organization is a layout as to the way forward and how much is this going to actually cost us to build this facility.
So I think the reported 30-some million.
So the Netherlands allocated 30 million. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Is it 30 million? Yes, it's 30 million.
Yeah.
I always play with all these zeros in my head. 20 million of those reserved funds are for the construction aspect of the prison. The other 10 million is for operations. But UNOP still has to tell us what it's going to cost us to build a facility, and then St. Martin will be responsible for financing the difference. So that is why it's so important for UNOPS to arrive, to execute this assessment and give us a final figure.
Okay. Is there any temporary measures being taken to at least address the issues currently being faced at the prison where, with whether it's with having more than 2 persons share a cell, and just the overall rehabilitative process?
Legally, the cells meet international standards for 2 persons to be in a cell. They have 2-person cells, 3-person cells. But during COVID, that was a high topic because the distancing, etc., was needed. But yes, indeed, improvements are happening at the prison as we speak. We have launched improvement teams, and these teams are working with the prison staff to be able to make certain improvements there. There was some low-hanging items that, let's say, a discussion that I had and a letter that I received from the Inmate Association that asked for certain things, like because it's hot up there, they wanted some igloos to be able to have ice water, etc. So as they're passing by, they can always just grab themselves some water to stay cool. They wanted to make sure that physical checks were being done. So I did write to the prison doctor and ask for assessments to be done. Let's see who has dental issues, who has optical needs, and other assessments to be done. And there's some, like I said, other low-hanging fruits, phones. We know that we have an issue with phones being illegally brought into the prison, but the inmate association made a valid point in saying, well, okay, we don't have a centralized phone system for us to be able to be in communication with our families, etc. And other prisons have that. Even taking the trip to the Netherlands, I was able to see certain operations, and you can see, well, yeah, we need to make these improvements for them. So we are busy with a phone company right now to get a certain phone system installed or provided to the prison. And there's quite a number of things. The gym, I just got pictures of the arrival of new gym equipment that came in. They are just trying to decide or figure out how to get the equipment inside the walls, whether cranes are too big, too small, etc. is what they're dealing with right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing the gymnasium for them. The sewing center back up and running, that was destroyed after Hurricane Irma, but has been since repaired. So we have a lot of great programs being launched at the prison. What bidding did happen, though, I can tell you about, is that for the chapel and the recreational facility. So where they're able to do the crafts and building and so forth, that's the bidding that you were probably referring to. Those were done, yes, and we look forward to the constructions of those items being taken place pretty soon.
Okay. So also in relation to immigration, one of the main criticisms that was, in the public sphere was particularly as it relates to the manner in which it was done. In a sense of persons who are mainly concerned that officers coming in with the mask, the guns, etc., was intimidating. And in a press briefing on Wednesday, you stated that it was controls and not raids. But would you say it is fair to say that they weren't raids? They weren't raids because it's not as violent as it used to be in the past. And do you think that what amendments will be made to basically ensure that when businesses are being controlled, it's not done in a threatening manner?
Okay, it becomes a raid when you run. If you have persons that are running out of establishments, that is where the raid looks. But if you have officers of the law as well as controllers of government stepping into an establishment and asking a question, they are executing a control. They are asking you for your documents to show that you are authorized or legal on the island, authorized to work. How is that raiding? If I'm asking you a question, I am controlling the facility. When you dash through a door and run, that's where the premise comes of raids.
I have to disagree there. I say that because with the raid will be more defined, particularly as it relates to enforcement of action at home or business, and that's due to businesses being suspected of involvement in criminal activity.
But it's not a suspect. You're not suspecting it if the controllers had already been to this establishment and had discussions with them before, and no types of actions were done in the past, because as the controllers have expressed, they have been to these establishments, spoken to them, and absolutely no improvements were done. So when the officers arrives with them, it is now seen as a raid. Why is it not seen as a raid when the controllers went without the officers?
Okay, I guess for me, I guess how I look at it is when the controllers go, that is the control. With the law enforcement, that is in a sense a raid, because you already know the immigration department knows the businesses that are violating the laws. So you basically suspect them of
But I realize as well that the onus is being placed on government and law enforcement. Law enforcement and government must be careful in the manner in which they go about it. But why are the businesses and those who are working who know that they're breaking the law? Where is the onus there? Let's avoid it. Let's avoid such an appearance by just ensuring that we follow the law. The law enforcement, if I were to go along with the way that you define it and you look at it, do you think law enforcement would need to go to an establishment if the controllers went, gave the advice that we recognize this is not being done right, when we return, we'd like to see it done correctly? They return, and the business owners are able to provide proof that they've done it. Do you think it would have been necessary for the officers to show up?
I get what you're saying. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you.
They would not?
Because I think having the law enforcement presence there given the fact that you have businesses who clearly are ignoring the violations, helps.
Yeah.
But I guess the perception of them coming in a threatening manner is intimidating. So I guess, is there any review? Because for example, let's say you have plainclothes officers who go, along with the controllers. I guess particularly for, let's say, if it's a restaurant or club, for persons in attendance, it wouldn't throw off the...
Totally understand. And as I said in press briefing, which you were present, there is discussions that's upcoming, and we will be able to decipher or decide whether or not adjustments is necessary. The objective here is not to...
not to say that you shouldn't, enforce the law, but I mean, if people are in a place and you see officers and stuff come in with guns and stuff, you wonder, well, are you in danger?
We definitely receive the sentiments.
In that sense.
We're not going to ignore the sentiments. What I am just trying to say is it is so interesting that when actions are taken, the scenario quickly turns over to, well, you shouldn't do it this way. Removing the onus from the businesses who should be doing it the correct way to begin with and avoid these types of displays. Nevertheless, we have agreed that we are going to meet as ministers with the multidisciplinary team, and we're going to work out what would be our phase 2 approach now, seeing that we have had at least 3 of these controls roll out. Persons are now aware that these controls will continue and totally understand and respected that there is a request that it could be adjusted in some ways so that it doesn't give consequences or negative reactions by those who are patronizing the establishments.
Yeah.
Totally understand.
Okay. And the one, I don't know if it's you who will have to respond to this, probably the Minister of TIA, because the one answer I wasn't getting was in relation to what is the final consequence. Because because you stated the businesses who are in violation, and they have been receiving warnings. So I guess in my view, it's like, then at that point, it's not even necessary to control them. Shouldn't it then be to shut down the business temporarily? Because then what? And
even that is going to get criticism. Even that is going to be seen as too harsh.
But still, no, because you're violating the law. I'm saying specifically in cases of businesses, which has been stated clearly on multiple occasions violate the law. Then how much more raids or controls can you do, and how much more warnings can you issue? So at what point do you cut it off? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're right. The Minister of TEAT would have to give that, even the Minister of VSA. But my legal team is also telling me, or they're doing some research to see what opportunity the Minister of Justice as well has. Yeah, because
I was curious, what powers do you have in that sense?
In terms of issuing fines as well. So we're looking at that. And I have absolutely no problem with enforcing or seeing to it that the law gets enforced. I would like that we not have to arrive at that. Some things are, it's steps. You're taking steps towards, and you would like to avoid having to really come down hard on any particular business or person. But all we are asking the business community to do, and the people, because one of the things too that we realize is, you can't keep penalizing the individual, the person. Yes, I know that I'm on the island illegal, etc., but there are opportunities being provided to those persons. So if you're going to take action against one, you need to take actions against all. So I totally agree with you in terms of your question as to what sort of penalties are being levied onto these institutions that are as well breaking the law. As you said too, this discussion is a very hot one. It's going on for quite a number of days, and it will continue. No, but I mean, in recent days, there are actions being taken that had not been taken in years. And then that's another thing that I think plays a role. It's been so long since this level of address has been made to this particular issue that everybody is basically in startled by it, because where is this coming from? But it's necessary. It's a topic that many don't like to talk about, and as time goes, the situation grows larger as a problem. The ultimate goal here is for us to regulate who is employed and that they're doing that correctly. We have migration happens all over the world, and we can't leave from here and go anywhere else and not respect their laws. So all I'm asking is for us to have who comes to St. Martin respect ours. But it's up to us to enforce it and ensure that those laws are followed. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of that needs to get done. And we have made a commitment as the Ministry of Justice to continue on this track where we are doing what we're supposed to do.
Gotcha. Okay. Understood. So I guess finally my point there is just I understand that there's a process to everything. You're not looking to off the bat be harsh and go to the extreme.
No, we aren't.
But then simply in the cases of those who've clearly just have totally disregarded the law, the additional leeway kind of don't make sense.
I hear you. I totally hear you.
Because another thing you mentioned, because for example, you mentioned something which is a fact, it's basically modern day slavery. Mm-hmm. And also to make it worse is that you also get political interference. Mm-hmm. So particularly as Minister of Justice, how would you address that? And is it to the point to publicizing persons who have, in a sense, been obstructing justice?
I hope not to arrive at that. I really hope not to. I really hope that it is understood that it's necessary to do the controls. It's necessary to ensure that all entities are doing their part. At the end of the day, everybody picks up the phone when something happens and they want to know, what is the police doing about this? What is immigration doing about that? What is the customs? There's fussing and carrying on, and you need to do this and you need to do that. But everything comes with a financial cost to it. And if on St. Martin, it means that certain activities need to be launched, and those activities need to be financed. That means that all of us, not just a few of us, I think everybody in this room, we're paying our taxes. We're contributing to the coffers. Everybody needs to be doing that, especially if you're earning an income on the island. You should have a crib number, and you should be paying your taxes. You should be contributing your fair share. And I understand some persons look at it like, well, even the undocumented is contributing to the economy because they're shopping in the grocery stores, etc. Well, some of those businesses are a part of the list who aren't complying, are not in full compliance. So how do we know that the full contribution is even being received by government? You know what I mean? So there's so many different legs to this that we have to just make sure compliance is met across the board. And ultimately, that's the goal, compliance.
So I just have two more questions for you because basically close to run out of time. Sorry about that. So, the first one being, what is your relationship like working with particularly the Minister of VSA and Labor? Because those are also one of the key areas where, that compliance is lacking on the labor front and the private sector.
Minister of VSA is one who I can say that we can all see as well. He does have a keen interest in making sure that the labor laws are adhered to. And I think him and his team are doing a good deed on that. We have what's called a covenant between these three ministries you've mentioned. And just this week, I think yesterday, as a matter of fact, the covenant did meet and are working towards a proposal that will address where justice and VSA comes together and puts forward a program to be able to give these persons who are working on the island working and living on the island for many years, an opportunity with their employers to do the right thing. As well as TEAT. How does that work in terms of persons who have business licenses? Because that's another thing. We have quite a number of persons who acquired business licenses but don't even operate the business. The business license was only acquired for the status of being able to acquire a residence permit, but they're working elsewhere. And that business isn't even functioning. So all of these elements are being peeled back like onions for us to be able to come up with a plan approach for at least the next 6 months, or I should say maybe mid-year until the end of the year, roll that out as a pilot program and see how we are able to assist those who really want to do right by this country.
Okay, so then finally, you mentioned during the press briefing that the Dutch government gave the border control project 16.3 million euros for border control and management.
Yes.
That was funds related to purpose of education opportunities for law enforcement officers, providing uniforms, equipment, etc., necessary for work. But with that, considering the I guess I would say the integration of the Justice Department in particular with the Dutch government or the kingdom, are you implying that in that, given the controls and raids that are currently taking place, is that directly or indirectly part and due to a command, let's say, from the Dutch government, but also wouldn't increasing the number of workers at the immigration department, as well as their equipment and education opportunities, be able to better fulfill the capacity at the department to handle for the number of requests and so forth for, by undocumented persons?
It definitely was not a demand or a command. But what it is that we reach out to the Netherlands for all sorts of assistance.
Okay.
And they have given us assistance. And assistance comes with, we can see even with the country packages, there are certain conditions that you have to meet. When I came into the ministry, this ORVG program was already running. But the way that I deduce this is, why would the Netherlands invest 16.3 million euros into border management? You're hiring persons, you're giving them equipment, you are giving them uniform to do what? Sit in an office and not execute their work by law? Why must it be questioned or insinuated that it is a demand or a command by the Netherlands to execute it? I think, and no pun intended by me saying this, because I think I read similar statement on social media. She's doing this because of the Netherlands. Common sense would tell us that if you are putting money into something, is because you need it to work. It is common knowledge that we have an immigration issue on the island and we need to fix it. Okay? Just like we have a situation at the prison. The Netherlands is making money available there. Is that a command or demand that is being levied on us? No, it is a need. We need those funds to be able to put a proper facility there. We needed those funds, obviously, to strengthen our border management. So at the end of the day, I think it would be irresponsible of me as Minister of Justice in this capacity to see that such an investment is being made for the betterment and strengthening of the agencies that fall under me, and not see to it that they execute their work as they are prescribed to do by law.
Gotcha. Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Minister Richardson.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Coming to the program. Some of the topics I wanted to touch on didn't get a chance to. So
really? I thought we touched on a lot of topics. But you circled back a lot to the immigration. So yeah.
Well, as you stated, I like to look at things from a holistic point of view, because there are other justice-related matters. But I mean, I look forward to having you back on again.
I would be honored. Thank you so much.
So with that, thank you. And to our viewers and listeners, I hope you guys also had a lot of takeaways from this conversation, and have a great weekend. Take care.